On the 26th of April 2021, we celebrate 75 years since Reed School officially moved to its present site at Cobham in Surrey. We are fortunate to have former pupils, our Old Reedonians, who remember not only this, but also their time when Reed's was located in Watford, and also in the Devon town of Totnes during the war. At that time, it was called the London Orphan School, where all pupils were supported by Andrew Reed's charitable foundation, helping them to overcome great turmoil in their young lives through faith, hope, and charity. This is their story, as told by a few. Imagine being a 7-year-old child and hearing that your world was about to be turned upside down. That is what many of our Old Reedonians experienced at the start of the Second World War.
When war was declared against Germany, it was a Sunday, and that was the 3rd of September. And I can clearly recollect sitting outside our kitchen door with my father and 2 brothers. My mother was inside, and we had the radio going, and we heard Chamberlain announce the fact that we were now at war with Germany. And shortly after that, the air raid sirens went, and this put not so people were thinking there was going to be an air raid, but then there was the all clear sound, that they were just effectively testing it. But that is very clearly in my memory.
When we got to the station, the air raid warning went off, and we all had to be ushered into the subway at Wimbledon Station. And that was really a puzzle as to what was happening. Being issued with gas masks, pavements being painted black and white and posts because of the blackout, and air raid shelters being dug out or issued to house. Plenty going on, plenty to remember, because it was quite a busy time, lots of people appearing in uniform.
I remember, of course, the horror of the bombing and seeing houses. You know, there was a department store in Ealing called Abernethy's, which was flattened. But the most frightening thing of all was the V1 rockets. You could hear them, but when the engine cut out, you didn't know where it was going to fall.
As if to compound the effect of the war, all our Old Reedonians at the time would sadly have experienced the death of at least one parent, many losing fathers fighting in the war or undertaking other vital roles. The impact of such loss on those so young cannot be underestimated.
Yes, it was the time, 1939, the war had just started. My mother hadn't told me my father had died, but said he was in the hospital where we couldn't visit him. A very weird reason, don't ask me why, but that was the way it went.
My father died in December 1939, and we were very fortunate to be taken on by the school.
I think losing my father was still the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life. The vicar said to my mother, you know, I think I know the right school for Geoffrey. It's Reed's School.
By the time the war broke out, Reed's had been at Watford for 68 years, having relocated from Clapton in 1871. As the war worsened, and the Reed's governors feared for the safety of the site in Watford, they took the difficult decision to evacuate the school and pupils. The girls were placed in various houses in Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire, and the boys were sent to the Seymour Hotel in Totnes. Some 100 boys made that long journey from Watford or arrived from homes up and down the country, many alone and for the first time.
They started bombing us, etc. And then I think that was the decision the government made, a coalition government at the time, to evacuate children from at least the London area and other cities up and down the country.
Moving so far away initially affected me, but after the first term, no, I wasn't affected by it at all. I used to look forward to seeing my mother. She used to come down to Totnes occasionally, maybe no more than about once a term, because she was working and it was a long way to come.
Yes, I remember the journey to Totnes, walked down the drive past the school chapel, and there were some coaches, got in the coaches, I remember, and I did recognise part of the journey through Windsor and Virginia Waters, which is not very far from where I lived. We were given a packed lunch, and when I opened my egg it was green, and I thought it was something wrong with it, but I was assured that this was how it had cooled, and they often turn like that. And come to think of it, it's not done too badly. You know, I'm very nearly 90.
Although this all took place over 75 years ago, the memories of Totnes still remain strong, and with much fondness, even though the boys had to adapt in so many ways. They boarded in large dormitories in a requisitioned hotel, attended classes in a converted ticket office, had little space to play, and of course made do with rationing. All this, combined with not seeing family for months, did not dampen the spirit of these resilient young boys, but instead they found new ways to entertain themselves.
I mean, when it came to walks, we would collect birds' eggs. Now this may not be the thing these days, but in those days, collecting birds' eggs, butterflies and moths as well. And we'd mount them and set them all up in things of that sort. It was part of the, the country element that one wouldn't have got in the Watford days. And you got to learn a lot about the countryside, which you wouldn't have had a chance to before.
There was no transport at all. No bikes, no cars, no motorcycles, nothing. Everywhere you went, it was walking. Walk, walk, walk.
We were very limited because we didn't have our own grounds, and we were assisted by the grammar school to an extent. We could have a bit of cricket and football. And there was quite keen interest in football, but no rugby was available because it didn't require any sporting facilities as such. Cross-country running, which kept us fit.
Remember, there's the tidal river, which is always an attraction, and the hills and woods and things. So that will always be a great memory.
When it came to weekends, we used to be taken on crocodile walks. We used to call it going on croc. And we covered all the areas around local to Totnes. We could see the trains going by. And there was one small train, steam train, of course, in those days. We called it the Ashburton Express. In fact, it was a tiny little train that used to chug along at about 2 miles an hour and used to cause quite a lot of hilarity.
When we did have a snowy winter, that found some corrugated iron sheeting and took it up I think it was Windmill Hill, and hurtling down on that. And very dangerously, there was a near cliff at the bottom.
As war continued, its impact on Totnes was relatively minor, and the boys continued their childhood and education as best they could. Then, in December 1943, the Allied leaders met and agreed to the opening of the Second Front in the west against Germany. This saw the arrival of Americans in Totnes, as it became one of the assembly locations in preparation for the Normandy landings the following June. The GIs and all they brought with them made a huge impact on our Reed's boys.
Memorable time was when the Americans were there, and they descended on Totnes and Devon in readiness for D-Day, and it was an insight into American culture, their uniform, their vehicles, the way they spoke, and they were generous.
They were nice guys. We being sort of little young teenagers, etc., probably reminded some of them of their kid brother at home. So they were nice to us. We had all kinds of sweets and Hershey bars and stuff from them. And I was walking through the park. I don't know why, but we used to go to the park, and there used to be a roadway going through it, and there was these bivouac tents on the inside. And I went past one, and a head poked out, an American. He said, "Hey kid," he said, "do you want this?" And it was a bag of Titan Lyle sugar. And I said, "Well," I took it. I went all the way back to school and handed it in. He said, "Where did you get that from?" And I said, "An American gave it to me." He said, "That's very good. Let's get off."
Well, it was great fun with the Americans because they would be wandering around, and they were always very, good for begging from when it came to some chewing gum or whatever it might, sweets and things like that. They were there on two counts, as I say, the manufacture of the assault boats, and also just accumulating there in their huge numbers.
There's the hotel just over the other side of the river called the Royal Seven Stars, where we go for our reunions, and the swing band, the American swing band, was there, and the music would drift across to us. And for a lot of us, it was great to hear.
Americans, they knew they were going into almost certain death. I mean, I don't know if you ever read any history on World War II, but I have to tell you, the casualty rate on D-Day was monstrous, about 30% casualties, dead, wounded or dead on the beaches. And these guys realized what they were up against.
Because with D-Day, they were there one minute, gone the next. And there was a great sort of blank in our life when they suddenly disappeared.
D-Day happened, and there wasn't an American soldier about. It was eerie, really. And that memory has stayed with me because in later years we realized, we were told by film and everything else just what a slaughter they faced when they hit the Normandy beaches. So it's a slightly dark memory, but it's still with me.
The D-Day landings marked an important turning point, which eventually led to the end of the war in Europe on the 8th of May 1945. This meant the Reed's governors had to give immediate thought to their plans for the boys' and the girls' schools and relocating them once again. But not necessarily back together, as the school site at Watford had been requisitioned by the Ministry of Works. Dogmersfield Park in Hampshire was purchased for the girls' school, and the boys were told they were on the move again to a place called Cobham.
And we were told we weren't going to go back to Watford, we were going to go to this place called Cobham in Surrey somewhere. I mean, where was this?
Of course, at that time we were getting news that we were going to move to a place called Cobham, and we would have new school buildings and facilities. Some of the staff had a preview, or we quizzed them as to what was awaiting us, and looking forward to it. My memory of leaving Totnes was there because a few of us lived on the south coast. We weren't on the school train, as it were, and just a few of us made our way to the station, and it was a very quiet farewell.
As I said, the first time I went, I had been in charge of the guard on the train to Paddington, and then I was met at Paddington. I can't remember, don't ask me who, but I can't remember who. But then he took me to Reed's.
At the end of December 1945, the headmaster in Totnes, Reverend Charles Attenborough, resigned. He was replaced by Henry Edward Denny Axton, aged 36, originally from Rotherham, but more recently a teacher in Worksop.
Axton was a new, different style of headmaster. I mean, he was more relaxed. He didn't wear clerical clothes, of course, and was like another master in a way.
He was so different from Mr. Attenborough. Well, he was a younger man. Mr. Attenborough had served in the First War, was a naval officer. He was a reverend. Mr. Axton was modern, and he had a family.
One of his features was ask the class, the boys, to sort of, for their opinions about things. And one of the things, any ideas of a motto for the school. And I thought, oh, I know exactly what I'll say. And my brother had been in the Royal Army Pay Corps during the war, and their motto was Fide et Fiducia. Then I thought, well, I can't say that because he knows I'm no use at Latin. So I was more than surprised when he came up with the motto that you may have heard, Fide.
The buildings and grounds at Cobham were originally the home of the elite Sandroyd prep school before the war. Hence it was deemed suitable for the boys. However, unlike the girls' site, it was in considerable need of repair and modernising, having been damaged by bomb and V2 rocket blasts. By his own account, Mr. Axton realised that restoring the school buildings and grounds to an acceptable standard was going to take a monumental effort. In a letter he wrote in the 1946 Reader magazine to introduce himself and Cobham to the school's former pupils, we learn just how great the challenge was. However, by 1948, his initial vision of renovating the school had been achieved. My acquaintance with Cobham began on a day in early November 1945, when I came through the woods from the station to find the building derelict looking. It was an act of faith on the part of the governors to see in this wreck the possibility of a fine school. That act of faith had to be repeated constantly during the last half year. The domestic staff came in and laboured heroically and cheerfully, while they still only had one gas ring to cook on and one water tap to draw from. Parties of boys came down in their holiday time to move furniture and clean baths and basins. A pitifully small ground staff started on the Herculean task of clearing the playing fields, gardens and lawns. By the beginning of May 1946, we were able to start recalling the school, and by half-term, about 3/4 of the normal complement of boys had come in. Conditions were of necessity makeshift. We moved constantly from classroom to classrooms as painting and electrical wiring was carried out, furniture kept arriving from Watford, agricultural machinery was brought or bought, a temporary games room and reading room were rigged up, school games, at first rugger in the long grass, then soccer as the grass was mowed, and finally cricket on a borrowed ground were organised, and the school began to feel its feet. Now, on the eve of another term, we look forward with real hopefulness to the future. We shall be able to feel confident that as time goes on, difficulties will disappear, and the school will have every reason to be proud of what, in the most literal sense, its members have shared in the making here at Cobham. Reed started its new life at Cobham officially on Friday the 26th of April 1946, with some pupils moving from Totnes over the course of a few months, and others joining the school for the first time, all of them continuing as foundation boarders.
There was a time when I came to visit here to see what was going on in the Christmas holidays, and there was snow on the ground, tractors were working and that sort of thing. But shortly after that, I went ill with pneumonia and was taken to Kingston Hospital, and then after Kingston Hospital to Convalesce down on the south coast. Came back from that, which was coincidental with the time of the fifth form coming here ahead of the rest of the school. And that would have been, I think, tail end of February or beginning of March.
But the great thing about this was there was huge amounts of space. I mean, they had a super, what they still have now, that big piece of green in front there was long grass. It was sort of up to your ankles or to grass there. That had to be made. But there was a superb cricket pitch they made out of that. But we also had playing fields for a change, and that was super. and we could walk around and make a nuisance of ourselves, etc. And this was a school that had been laid out as a school, right? And a very high class one, because it was a prep school for very senior people.
And there was Virginia creeper all over the front of the school, which actually was gave it a lot of colour, but it all was a bit not quite ready. And the corridors that we've been walking through here, I can remember they were being papered. So we had workmen inside the school.
I remember the magnificent cricket square that we have there now at Cobham was covered in molehills. In fact, we used to amuse ourselves by catching the moles, and we had a cocoa tin, and being sandy soil, it was quite easy to dig down with our hands, bury this cocoa tin, and then release the mole, and it would dig down into the soil and end up back in the cocoa tin, and we'd repeat it.
What a great place it was by comparison with, where we had been in terms of the facilities, the open, all grounds we could tear around and lose ourselves in. We were able to play rugby, we were able to play soccer if we wanted to, and cricket in the summer.
This is the biggest place that I've ever seen. That was the first impression.
Yes, it was a big change from Totnes. We had playing fields on our doorstep. We had proper classrooms. We had a gym that was popular, and the grounds were quite expansive as well.
My favourite memory of the school, or fondest memory, is being on the cricket pitch, I think. Most of the time at school, when the weather was favourable, I never wanted to be doing anything other than playing cricket.
And I can always remember the first time I played for the first 15 at school. We played Surbiton High School, and we got hammered, and we lost 49-3. Why I remember that score, I do not know, except that I scored the 3. I kicked it.
Our short film has taken us on a journey from Watford to Totnes to Cobham, over 380 miles in total. Our ORs will have undertaken that incredible journey aged between just 7 and 13. Such an episode in their young lives left an indelible mark in more ways than one. The locations and buildings still hold many memories for our Old Reedonians, but there is something more than bricks and mortar that creates that strength of loyalty they have for the school and for each other.
When I went for my very first teaching job, I'm thinking of the phrase now, the old school tie. I went to the interview, and the headmaster got my application, and he looked at it and he said, I see you've been to Reed School, very good school. Of course, I agreed with him and I got the job.
I liked Reed's. Reed set me up for the life, because what it did, it gave me confidence that you could do what you wanted to do. You had no father to talk to and talk you through things or smooth the path for you. And I thought that was the big thing about Reed's.
Oh, I think it set me up completely to be an individual, which I started my own business and everything. And I said it's through Reed's that I did that, without any shadow of doubt, that is. Wish I was back then now. But in other words, I wish I was younger.
Reed's is like a big, or was like, and it appears to be very similar these days, although it's much larger, like a very large family. I don't think I would have achieved all the things I have done. Not that they're much to shout about, but it gave me confidence, and it taught me how to conduct myself through life. And I'm immensely grateful to the school for the opportunities that it gave to me.
Well, anyway, it comes to mind that faith, hope and charity, looking back, you've got sort of Andrew Rood's faith, the hope that there is something in the future, that you can get something out of wherever you are. I say the charity side, I suppose, is the fact these days charity in the Bible is converted into love. And the love that one gets from all the people involved.
I think the friendships are still strong, as can be evidenced by our reunions. The standards the school set stay with you. Those are very rich inheritance.
Despite their many life challenges from an early age, including war, bereavement and uncertainty, the Old Reedonians we have filmed represent generations of our former pupils who are living the embodiment of the Foundation. The aim of the Foundation has always been and will continue to be the same: to provide vulnerable children with an excellent education and, most importantly, the best pastoral care in a safe and nurturing environment. This in turn instills the self-confidence and self-belief needed to succeed and thrive in today's world. No one tells it better than these wonderful gentlemen, who will continue to leave their mark on the successful school that Reeds is today.